Welcome back to On the Ball, the podcast from the Vanderbilt Sports and Society Initiative. I'm Andrew Maraniss, and today we're going to have a guest host, Ricky Thrash, my colleague here at the Vanderbilt Athletic Department. When I saw the subject of Pavel's book, I knew that Ricky needed to lead this conversation, the biggest European soccer fan that I know here in Nashville. So our guest today just arrived in the United States from Germany, Pavel Brunssen. He's a research associate and Alfred Landecker lecturer at the Research Center on Anti-Gypsyism at Heidelberg University. His research interests include anti-Semitism, anti-Gypsyism, memory cultures, European soccer, and fan cultures. He holds a PhD in German studies from the University of Michigan, and he just mentioned that he'll be in Ann Arbor to speak about this book when Michigan Wolverines take on their rival Michigan State Spartans. So you definitely timed your trip back to the U.S. perfectly, Pavel. At Michigan, he received the Marshall Weinberg Prize for his dissertation on the making of Jew clubs, performing Jewishness and Antisemitism in European soccer and fan cultures, which is also the title of his new book from Indiana University Press. He's on a U.S. tour to share about this book right now, joining us from the University of Maryland, where he's to speak tonight. He'll be on the Vanderbilt campus this Friday, March 6th at 1:25 to speak to a class, but that event will also be open to the public, and we'll share information on that in the notes about the podcast. But without further ado, I'm going to hand the mic off to my good friend Ricky, and can't wait to listen to this conversation just like the rest of you. Take it away, Ricky.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. I feel like, first of all, Paul, is so fantastic. It's great to meet you. It's great to talk to you. I feel like Andrew has really hyped me up a lot, saying that like I'm the biggest European, football fan that he knows. He doesn't know many people. Like he doesn't know many people in this space. So don't think that it's not for me. It's just his lack of maybe like having friends who follow any European football at all. But it's excellent to have you here. I think, for me, I would love to know a little bit about you. I know you said you're from Germany. What's your background? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you, Ricky and Andrew, for the invitation. It's a pleasure talking to you. And Ricky, I know that you are a soccer expert. I listened to some of the podcast episodes after your invitation and heard that you made a trip to South Africa and learned about soccer culture there, and that was
Awesome.
fascinating. I would love to do such a trip as well
It was, yeah, it
someday.
really was phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up with European soccer culture in Germany. I'm from Bremen, which is a town
Hmm.
in the north of Germany. It's not a really big town, but still had one of the major European soccer or football clubs.
Hmm.
Now we are close to the second league. We're still in the first league. And so I grew up there, and as a boy growing up in Bremen, it's just kind of natural to become a fan of the club because the whole city is in green white and kind of lives with the club and identifies with
Hmm.
it. The stadium is in the center of the city. It's really nicely located. It's still one of these old stadiums where you have a nice walk through the center,
Yeah.
through all the pubs, through the restaurants, and it's next to the river. It's just really beautiful. And so I grew up there and started to became attached to the football culture. Evening games, floodlit stadium,
Hmm.
the people from the town going to the games, wearing the jerseys. And as I grew a bit older, I realized that people were chanting next to me stuff that really kind of shocked me when I started to understand what they were doing. I didn't understand at the beginning, but when I was, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, I
Hmm.
continued to go and I understood a bit more about society and relationship in
Wow.
society. And I understood that they were chanting towards the other team something like asylum seekers or racist stuff against Turkish players.
Wow.
And they
Yeah.
were also chanting about sending the other club to Auschwitz, the concentration and
Mm.
extermination camp Auschwitz, and really wishing kind of on a symbolic level though, but still
Hmm.
their main rivals. It's like in Michigan, we would chant Michigan State, please go to I don't know to Auschwitz or something. And this, of course,
Yeah.
in a German setting.
Hmm.
And so I was troubled. And as a student, I started to found a magazine on football culture because there were some political tensions playing out at the moment
Yeah.
between some more progressive fans in the fan culture and some more traditional conservative right-leaning who
Hmm.
were attached or kind of linked to these kinds of chantings. And so me and some other people from Germany, we wanted to understand better kind of the political dimensions, the
Mm.
societal dimensions of football culture. And so we started a magazine as students. We published 4 issues a year. It was available on every train station in Germany, so it was kind of
Wow.
a thing in the debate. But still, I was not really satisfied with the answers, and I started to become the desire. I wanted to be an academic. I want to write books about this, and this is not
Mm.
enough. And I did an MA on anti-Semitism research
Wow.
and did my master's thesis on anti-Semitism in German fan culture, which I then kind of was continuing studying, and I think 1 or 2 years into my PhD program, I published this as a book in German. So this was my
Hmm.
first book. And then at some point, I became aware of these weird thing called Jew clubs
Hmm.
that exist all over in certain European countries.
Hmm.
And this really kind of fascinated me. And this is the book that I'm going to speak about on Friday at Vanderbilt.
Wow. It's very interesting. And I talked to Andrew about this notion of kind of fan behavior and these cultural connections that we see and how this can manifest itself in a stadium. Uh, but there was a lot that to me as a black man, in the South who grew up in the South, I often there's a meme or a joke in the United States that the European mind can't comprehend, and it'll be like, something from like Southern college football. You know what I mean? Like it might be a a West Virginia fan base and they're setting couches on fire after they win a football game, an American football game. And it'll be like, the European mind can't comprehend this, or the European mind can't comprehend, and it'll be like our arch rival at Vanderbilt University is the University of Tennessee. So their stadium and it's all checkerboarded and everybody's wearing like overalls and stuff, and it's kind of a funny thing. But to me, the irony of the meme is I actually think the European mind can comprehend that. I think that especially when you put it in the context of fandom, fandom around football, or as you would call soccer, or as we would call soccer, but football, for you. But when I read the title of the book, and I didn't have a chance to read the whole book, but did get to kind of skim through, um, and it evoked a lot of memories, images of Southern college football to me, and thinking about Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi, and how they would, you talk about memory culture, and so much of this fanfare and Confederate, um, kind of imagery was kept alive in a lot of ways through the 1960s and 70s through a lot of these Southern college football teams. And then, being forced to really kind of deal with a lot of these issues of like, do we integrate? Do we have black players? How do black people feel about these teams? That answer might be different now in 2026 compared to, 1986 or something like that, where you didn't see a lot of like maybe black fans of these bigger Southern college football teams. So I say all that to say that there are so many elements of what's written in this book that even though it's not about, say, my history or my culture, it feels like it rhymes. You know what I mean? It feels like there's a way that I can kind of connect to it. But you mentioned, you discovered the that there were these Jew clubs that existed for the American mind that may not be able to comprehend some of these things around, European football. What does that mean? What is a Jew club?
Yeah, that's the big question of the book, right?
Yeah.
So I encountered certain major European soccer clubs that are known as Jew clubs in the public, even though they have no strong Jewish connections.
Mm.
They had Jewish officials, players, whatever, but other clubs had that too, and to
Hmm.
the same degree. So there is something in the public that identifies these clubs as Jewish, even though they are not like identifying as Jewish themselves. Like is a Jewish sport movements, Maccabi, Hakoach in
Hmm.
Vienna in Austria, for instance. So there are Jewish clubs, but these are not
Hmm.
Jewish clubs, these are Jew clubs.
Mm.
So there is something related to anti-Semitism regarding these clubs. One of the clubs, for instance, is Austria Vienna. And
Mm.
here we have in the early 20th century a situation where the club becomes kind of the culturally coded club for things, spaces, places, whatever,
Hmm.
associated to Jewishness, like modernity, globalism, cosmopolitanism, the coffee house,
Wow. Mm.
and even a certain playing style. They are known as the Intelligenzmannschaft, the intelligent team. So
Mm.
they actually created something that was called Scheibern.
Hmm.
Scheibern is like a plate, a Scheibe. And
Hmm.
so the Austrian dialect calls it Scheibern because the players move the ball around in a circle.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
this was something that was completely different to like traditional Austrian teams who were like more kick and rush. And, we kind of more like the traditional Michigan football team would
For
go
sure.
in
Yeah,
their
yeah.
running game, right? And instead, Austria Vienna was kind of the Jew club. And one reason was because they also had this one player called Matthias Sindelar, not a
Hmm.
Jew, but he was called the Mozart of football. He was
Wow.
understood to be someone who was dancing over the field and touching the ball with care and with these fine movements. And the main rival, Rapid Vienna, had a guy he was a superstar. He was called Uridil, and he was like known as the Tank because he was like brutal force. He was
Okay.
not beauty at all. He was just
We'll keep with the Austrian. We'll go with the Arnold Schwarzenegger, yeah.
right.
You got
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Mozart and then the Arnold Schwarzenegger.
yeah,
I like
yeah.
that.
And then maybe to bring another team in. So in English football in the
Hmm.
1970s, 1980s. Today we have this kind of glamour product of Premier League, but just a few
Hmm.
decades back, there was a football stadium culture that was full of racism. There were
Mm.
neo-Nazis. There were hooliganism was
Hooligans,
rampant. I
yeah.
mean, not all of them racist, but racism
Hmm.
was pretty much unchecked and
Wow.
present in every stadium. And there was one club that stood out. There was Tottenham Hotspur in London, and the club
Hmm.
stood out because they were attacked not with anti-black racist terms, but as the Yids, so as the Jews of
Hmm.
English football. And I mean, there are many reasons why Tottenham and not another club. But one thing that really stands out with Tottenham as well is that in the late 1970s, so a couple of years later, the Tottenham fans started to call themselves the Yid Army, and they shouted back at the anti-Semites and said,
Yeah.
you call us the Yids, you make these chants like Hitler should gas them again and hissing noises when our
Wow.
players enter the field and to
Mm.
imitate a gas chamber and stuff like this. Well,
Mm.
okay, here you have to get Army, so we're proud of it. Let's so they kind of
Reclaimed it. Yeah.
yeah reclaimed is
Mm.
difficult in this context because most of them are not Jewish. So it's not really reclaiming because they are
Wow.
attacked anti-Semitically as Tottenham
Hmm.
fans, but not as Jews.
Hmm.
I mean there's overlaps. So I
Yeah.
would more call it something like an appropriation than a reclamation in a way. But it's also mixed with reclamation in a sense because they have a significant portion, like between 5 or 10% or something, of Jewish supporters as well.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I talked to many of them, and many expressed that this was a form of solidarity they had not experienced
Wow.
outside of the stadium. So that there's also belonging, agency,
Hmm.
being part of something, responding to anti-Semitism in a way that, imagine a stadium of 60,000 where thousands of people chant something anti-Semitically, and then you have
Hmm.
maybe the away sector with, I don't know, 1,000 fans or something chanting back and responding to the
Yeah.
anti-Semitism and in a way say, no, we don't agree with what you're doing here. And
Man,
we take over that label. Yeah.
this is so complex and so interesting. You know, the I like how you maybe are not putting this in the category of reclaiming the term. Because that doesn't necessarily fit here. Um, but when you have these terms, I know like the Yid Army and what is I it's like Yoden maybe is kind of like a terms that would
And
have
the
traditionally
yeah.
been used as a slur, and now they're repurposed. Um, you mentioned that the fan base was maybe 5-10% Jewish, like for say Tottenham Hotspur. Um, are they any more Jewish in their fan base than say Chelsea or their North London rivals in Arsenal? Um, at least today, and has that always been the case? I'm just curious. Like, I mean, you mentioned like the why there, why Tottenham? Is it just because of proximity in London? Like a historical association with the Jewish community in London, and that's why they still have, this sort of identifier today. And does that manifest itself in a way that they are more Jewish in any way other than, them proclaiming that they're the I don't I'm a little bit sorry to let's hit pause on that question because I don't want to offend anyone by saying the Y word and just flippantly throwing that out there. Could you talk about the complexity of that word and that concept and maybe what role for like a non-Jewish fan, a non-Jewish, observer, what is the relationship with that? And I'm not associated with Tottenham at all. I'm not Jewish, and I don't, so it's almost I have a tinge of uncomfortability with even saying the word. But what are your thoughts on that? And then I'll kind of pitch it back to my other question.
Yeah, understandably so. The word is highly contested,
Mm,
and so it was used from the late 1970s until around 2010
hmm
without really being criticized by the Tottenham fan
mm,
base. And then an initiative that is called Kick Racism Out, or now Kick It
yeah.
Out,
hmm
from England, created kind of a campaign film that was called The Y Word.
Yeah.
And you can really kind of do the research that in that moment or from that moment on, in the public, like in newspapers, what p newspapers, journalists used to refer to as Yid has now become the
hmm
Y word.
mm,
But speaking to Tottenham fans, I think the word is still kind of so complex and there's so much in it. So there are people that argue, well, we're using it and rightly so, because it's a form of pride, it's a form of solidarity, it's a form of a nickname for the team and for us as fan base, and it connects
hmm
my Jewish identity and my
mm,
my fandom. Then there are others, Jewish fans, who say, well, I'm not using the term, I don't feel comfortable because the word is
hmm
different from the English term Jew, which is both a slur and the term for self,
mm,
right? So,
hmm
so there's this double meaning of the term always present.
hmm
There's always identification, representation on many levels. And Yid
Wow.
has always been a slur word. It was never like Jew or the Yiddish Yid, which is a
Mm,
polite term in the language of Yiddish.
hmm
Um, and then there are Jewish Tottenham supporters who say, well, I don't feel comfortable with the Y word at all because it has this anti-Semitic, this hate word history to it, and it
hmm
carries this meaning even when Tottenham fans use it. And I don't even go in the stadium anymore because I don't want to hear
Wow.
it. I don't want to get exposed to it, and I don't want my children to get exposed to it. And
hmm
this is also why I'm not calling it reclamation, because the word and identity is so complex and has all these meanings at the same time. It
Yep.
is ambiguous in a way. And then there are the Jewish supporters of other clubs, like Chelsea, for instance,
hmm
who are part of a fan collective that for decades has been involved in these anti-Semitic hate speech chanting. And so
hmm
they, as a Jew in the stadium present, kind of experienced this curious moment of one fan culture being anti-Semitic, another one responding with a word that is highly contested
mm,
as self-identification. And they said, well, okay, where am I in this? So
wow.
in the concept of linguistic reclamation, with what we have seen with words like the N-word, gay, queer,
hmm hmm
there's usually this reclamation, meaning change, and then the word kind of becomes changed and acceptable for the public, for non-group members, like people who are not part of the group, to use it again, like with gay or queer, are not like the N word. And with the Y word, I think that's still, yeah, after kind of
Yeah.
this circle. And there was a big public debate around this
hmm
in the newspapers and television, in the public, like, okay, what's going on with Tottenham? And
Mm.
I think, yeah, probably it's more confusing than ever and more
That
contested
is
than ever
fascinating.
before now. Yeah, yeah.
Very fascinating. I mean, and it evokes, I'm sure there are plenty of American football fans that, it would evoke, conversations around the Washington Commanders, formerly the Washington Football Club, formerly the Washington Redskins, and this name that, you know, in any other context, it's a slur. There's not really much ambiguity around that. It's the historical context of that word. And then, kind of you speak to this continuum of, well, where do we draw the line in America? It's very interesting. You see it in baseball with the Cleveland Indians changing their name to the Cleveland Guardians. I'm a fan of the Atlanta Braves. And there are, and this, I think we may be able to draw another connection back to European football again, in that I want to talk a little bit about performance and performative Judaism, right? And thinking about, you know, in America, there are certain clubs or teams that have connection to specifically Native American tribes, First Nation tribes, right? Or groups or peoples. I think about the Florida State. There's a football team, a college team, Florida State. They're the Florida State Seminoles, and they, and I'm not an expert on it, but I know that they speak to a connection to the Seminole tribe. And they, you know, have uh someone who I don't know, but they come out on a horse and, stab a flaming spear into the middle of the pitch before the game. My childhood baseball team, the Atlanta Braves, um, there have been movements to ban certain cheers that they do. But every few years they roll out like a statement from a conglomeration of people, said to be representing certain Native American groups that say, nah, it's cool, it's okay. It's okay that
Mhm.
they do that. And so that kind of gives cover to maybe fan behavior. Do we see that as well, like in European football with these, say, Jew clubs, and as I'm saying that, I'm thinking of Ajax and I'm thinking of Tottenham specifically, in like maybe a performative nature of like I'm performing that I'm something that maybe I'm not any other day or any other place. But when I'm here in Spurs Stadium, I'm performing this Judaism, or, to a certain degree, or we're kind of connected. Does that question make sense?
It does make sense. And performative Jewishness is part of the book title. So it's a main
Mm,
part of the book to try to understand what's going on with people who are not Jewish.
hmm
Why are they engaging in a performative practice, in these rituals, in these, I don't know, fan day rituals,
hmm
where they perform Jewish identities, or I would say Jew club identities, because they are not Jewish identities. They are not about Jewish culture. They are not
Right.
about Jewish. Yeah, in most cases, I would even be skeptical to say they are about Jewish people. So there is this solidarity
Mm,
element, but to a large degree, specifically today, I mean, in the 70s, it probably was more about this reaction to the anti-Semitism by rival fans. And today, I would say there are even young Tottenham fans who don't know about this origin and development of the term,
mm,
and who are standing in the stadium and chanting Yid Army and Yiddo Yiddo and
hmm
this kind of stuff.
Or maybe even sing
And
like Hava Nagila, or
yeah,
like
yeah,
have a the
Yeah,
Star of David,
yeah,
on their,
yeah, yeah.
like on a scarf or something like that.
Exactly.
But
Yeah,
yeah.
that's both more with Ajax, I believe. I mean, this the Star of David with Tottenham as well, but
Hmm.
Hava
Hmm.
Nagila was chanted by Ajax supporters. So
Hmm.
Jewish folk songs kind of bringing to the stadium, and so what's going on here? And I believe what we see in the stadium is that is something that is mostly unconscious on a certain level that breaks
Mm.
through on the surface in the specific situation of the stadium, where you have a mass culture, you have identification, you have emotions, you
Mm.
have an exciting game that is low scoring, right? That is different from football and basketball, that is often one. So
Sure.
so so you have a certain tension for the 90 plus minutes of the game, that this could be the moment of the one goal that decides
Yeah.
over the championship or relegation, promotion,
Hmm.
or who's winning today. And so there is a certain excitement and tension related to soccer that I also think is specific in a certain way. Um, and what breaks through here is kind of an engagement with the history of the Holocaust and the Jewish history of
Hmm.
Europe.
Hmm.
And this started in most stadiums in the context of not before the 1970s, at least not what we're seeing today, and these kind of performative Jewishness practices by fan cultures. And this is the moment when Holocaust memory becomes a
Mm.
thing in these countries, in England, in Netherlands, in Germany, in Austria. The series Holocaust was important when the taboo kind of was lifted to talk about what
Wow.
happened and what people had done, and there was
Hmm.
the '68 generation starting to ask questions and all these things, and this developed into societal consciousness that there's something happened that we should be more aware of. And football supporters responded in a certain and troubling, weird, but interesting way. And they are
Hmm.
still doing this today. And I believe specifically in the context of institutionalized commemoration, ritualized memorial days, repeating speeches by politicians that sound the same every year.
Hmm.
Like what does working through the past even mean today? And here we have a certain collective a kind of something break through to the surface, that there is something that we're not done with as Europeans, and
Hmm.
specifically as Germans, but also other Europeans in related ways. That I think the Jew clubs kind of question us to think about where we are at societies, where we are
Wow.
in relationship between majority and minority population, if you want to call it this way. And I think that these Jew club identities really force us to remember that, yeah, memory is always also complicated and linked to identities in the present, national identities, local
Wow.
identities,
Hmm.
political authority, and we have to keep asking questions.
Man. I I wanna you talk about um kind of memory and history, historical context. We haven't talked a ton about Bayern Munich, but I want to. I have a few friends who are Bayern Munich supporters. I think Bayern has a pretty substantial fan base in the United States. And to a few of them, I just kind of ask the question of what is your understanding, knowledge of Bayern in the context of them being identified as a Jew club? No one had, at least that I spoke to, had any memory or understanding of that. They didn't know about that particular history. In what little bit of research that I've done or what I've learned, um, it's a very interesting and fascinating history that to me feels separate, maybe even more so from, say, Tottenham or Ajax in what their connection was, in particular pre-World War II and during kind of the Nazi regime, and then kind of a long arc to post-World War II acknowledgement, celebration of maybe some of that history. But can you kind of walk our listeners through Bayern Munich and maybe what kind of club history they have, how they have kind of been given this title of being a Jew club, and where are we today with Bayern Munich in that history?
Yeah, Bayern is a great case, and that's different from Ajax and Tottenham. So I have four cases, right? I have Bayern Munich,
Hmm.
Austria Vienna, Ajax Amsterdam, Tottenham Hotspur. And the German-speaking cases of Bayern and Austria Vienna are different from the non-German-speaking
Yeah.
Netherlands and UK cases in the way that Ajax and Tottenham are really kind of appropriating this Jew club identity in a way that they call themselves the Jews in the present.
Mm-hmm.
And Austria and Bayern are both more about my chapters are more about the relationship between history and memory,
Mm.
also as separate concepts. And the history of Bayern Munich in the context of the Jew club is most importantly the former club president Kurt Landauer, who
Mm.
was the club president before, during, and after Nazism. He survived an exile in Switzerland. He came back in the late 1940s and became the club's president again. And he led Bayern Munich to the first national championship in 1932, so 1 year before the
Mm-hmm.
Nazis came to power. And Kurt, Kurt Landauer was not remembered as a club icon, as a club symbol until the early 2000s.
Wow.
And it was not the club itself, but the fan culture that started bringing him into the memory of the club. Like they had
Mm-hmm.
big banners, flags that are done by the fans themselves. They pay for it, they put all the work in it, and they put huge shows over their area of the stadium. And they had a big a symbol of Kurt Landauer's face and
Mm-hmm.
written with a statement, and they organized events commemorating him and saying this was the Jewish president of Bayern Munich, German Jewish president. He was extremely important for this club, and we are proud of this history and we identify with it. And
Mm-hmm.
only a few years later, the club kind of joined. They didn't want to know anything about it.
Wow.
They refused interviews. They said this is long history. We're not talking about this. And after the fans kind of established this memory, the club also now is very proud of him and made him an honorary president. And there's a statue at the practice facilities of Kurt Landauer.
Mm.
But in the context of Jew Club, what's interesting is that, or my argument about Bayern Munich is kind of I'm interested in kind of understanding and tracing how commemoration and forgetting worked here, because he was forgotten for so long and then he was remembered within just a very short time with a TV film that aired on the first German TV program, and it was a
Mm.
big popularization of Landau as a symbol, and many things that were related to him. The argument, or one argument, is that memory is always also a form of forgetting.
Wow.
So all this commemoration and memory happened, but at the same time, it was forgotten that it was the club itself that
Mm.
forced Landauer out of the club. It was not kind of from the outside, from the Nazi regime. I mean, they of course put the context, but the club itself
Mm.
finally put something in their statutes that said no
Mm.
Jews anymore. And Landauer came back after 1945, and when he became the club president again, he himself kind of made the argument we have to draw a line under the history. And he was
Mm.
involved in the reintegration of Nazi party members and Jews and other old Bavarian club members from FC Bayern.
Mhm.
He came back into a situation where anti-Semitism persisted, where it was, to say the least, not possible or not encouraged to talk about Nazi
Mm.
history as a Jew.
Mhm.
Um, and so with all of this in mind, it's a bit of a complex story. And as the fans started to commemorate and remember him in the way they did, which is great in many ways, they also started to tell the story of we have been discriminated against as a Jew club during Nazism. And well, this kind of we're proud that we were a Jew club in the past, remember, not in the present, like Ajax or Tottenham.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, this is kind of forgetting or kind of burying some of the more
Wow.
difficult history that the club is facing now. They kind of came from memory to history. This is kind of an
Mm,
arc that I'm trying to trace. Like there was memory culture, and then there was real historical work. So they were interested in history, but kind of now they are getting the more complex picture, I would say, more appropriately in their exhibitions, in their storytelling. But for a short period of time, they really had this kind of, we were the Jew club. So this also served to kind of, in a way, legitimize their close relationship to Qatar in the context of the World Cup there, anti-Semitism there,
mm,
homophobia there, human rights violations there. So they had a
mm.
very big sponsorship by Qatar, and at the same time developed this Landauer memory. So there are all kinds of layers to the
Complex,
Bayern
man.
history, which is
Yeah.
super fascinating. Yeah.
That is, man, you really hit me with the quote there about memory, history, and what we remember, what we forget, and are these ways of, what level or what do we see in the form of a little bit of erasure, or we kind of whitewash a little bit of this history or this memory and turn it into this heroic, you only hear now, we're only presenting one side of it. And that wasn't necessarily accurate to how it happened. I think a lot about, I don't know if you're Andrew, our normal host is a fantastic author, like yourself, and has a wonderful book about Perry Wallace, who um was almost this, in the Vanderbilt context, a seemingly forgotten heroic figure that was on the front lines of integrating the conference, the SEC. And Perry, went to Vanderbilt University and played basketball here and broke the color barrier, in the SEC. Um, and Andrew speaks of his time as a student and kind of almost organically learning about, like, where you're, I don't want to say fully rediscovering, but you're kind of learning about this history and realizing that your peers don't know anything about this. That was 30 years ago, and there's no there aren't many acknowledgments, and as now we've reconciled that in many ways, and we're able to do so with um Perry Wallace as a guide to that reconciliation and what that looked like. But something that you speak of to me that really connected was, one of the reasons why I feel like in this context at Perry's, that there was a pause or a shutdown of that conversation for so many years, is because Perry spoke out about how difficult his time was when he was a student here, and having to face racism and not feeling protected by the university, not feeling, necessarily protected in any other context other than for that 60 minutes on the clock where I'm playing a college basketball game, or, whatever, you're supporting me. But other than that, I don't get much support. And so I think people having to deal with that hard truth decided to ignore it and put it in a box. And then we brought it out a few decades later, and maybe, you kind of have to fight the urge to initially just, oh, he's so brave and this was so great and he was so strong, and not really dig into why did he have to be brave and why did he have to be strong and what happened beyond just the glory, of this. So I the story of Byron is is one that I found very fascinating, and very, like you said, just so complex. And it's so interesting that we now are having, some of these conversations, or, you know, what kind of current climate has put a tenor or a new tone into these conversations. Um, I know we're probably running a little short on time. I had written down, as I think about these kind of four different time zones or eras, and I feel like we've touched on this, of like kind of pre-World War II. What were some of these histories? What were some of these connections? Was it just proximity of the stadium? Does the stadium just happen to be in a more Jewish part of town, or are there, people kind of who founded the club, who maybe are connected to the Jewish community during World War II, or during the reign of the Nazis, post World War II. But now the fourth one to me is, kind of current day. And I know that we don't have a ton of time to get super into it, but I feel like a lot of conversations around anti-Semitism are very much in the forefront of daily life. And, we see it manifest in many ways. Um, we talk about fans and we talk about clubs, and those aren't always the same thing. Clubs, a lot of times, are big corporate entities that are billion euro organizations, right? And fans they don't operate in that same way or within those same structures. Can you give us a little bit of where are we now almost with these four clubs, and um do they have any, is there a voice that's lended to, say, like an anti-Semitism movement um by any of these clubs that are labeled as Jew clubs, or you know what I mean? Like thinking about, Tottenham, Ajax, Bayern, FK Austria, like do they speak out about anything, or what role do they play in any of these conversations?
Yeah, that's a big question at the end, because it's so developing and so contested still,
Mm,
in each of these four cases. And what makes a Jew club are different things. And one of it is that either the fans or the club management itself has to kind of embrace the identity for themselves. And at least this is the case in these four clubs, that they have to say it for themselves in a way. We are a Jew
hmm.
club. Um, and maybe I start by answering that I have researched and written the manuscript before October 7, before the
Mm,
attacks on Israel. And I felt, while I was kind of getting the peer reviews from the publisher, from colleagues, and was rewriting the book, I felt like, okay, this book is read differently today than it was before the 7th of October and everything that came after it. And I mean, they are not Israeli clubs. This is not about Israel, but the discussions about anti-Semitism are always also related to Israel today, or not always, but often.
Awesome. Sure.
And so I wrote an afterword, like, okay, where are we now? What are the Jew clubs after October 7? And with Bayern Munich, I found that there's an interesting difference, because before it was that the fans started to engage with the history, with Kurt Landauer, who was he, started to remember him, and then the club joined. After the fans kind of really forced the club to do so and put
Hmm.
pressure on the club. You have to identify with him. He's important. And after October 7, the fan culture, usually they are very kind of, they speak out about political situations, about this Qatari sponsorship, for instance. They
Hmm.
did a lot of initiatives, roundtable discussions, interviews, podcasts, flyers, statements.
Hmm.
And after October 7, they were interestingly silent, while the club itself was kind of in line with the general German position of, we stand with Israel. And they made statements like, okay, let's go to a demonstration against anti-Semitism in Germany, but also for the victims of October 7. Austria Vienna is an interesting case, because Austria Vienna had this kind of anti-Semitic association in the early 20th century, between World War I and World War II, modernism, Jewishness, coffee house, like a checklist of different concepts that anti-Semites would associate with Jews.
Hmm.
And the fan culture from maybe the 1980s onwards or so kind of redefined these, like, okay, this is modernity, this is remember, intelligent team and so on, and said we
Hmm.
are a locally rooted traditional club, so the opposite of
Wow.
what the Jew is in an anti-Semitic mind, because we had this player who was the Mozart of football, because we have this coffee house
Hmm.
Viennese culture to the club. So we have a tradition, we are locally rooted, we are authentic, and bodenständig is a concept there and whatever. Like, okay, so they kind of, I think I labeled the subchapter something like how to unjew the Jew Club. Like, okay, they
Wow.
have all these associations that are still part of the club identity, but they say, well, it's not Jewish. I mean, they
Mm,
don't say it, but it's
hmm
really kind of written between the lines. Okay, this is not
hmm
Jewish anymore. This is Austria Vienna, our locally rooted club.
Yeah.
So it also shows how the anti-Semitism is never stable. It's always changing. It's developing. So I have a concept I introduced. I call the Jew imaginary framework to think of, okay, the Jew is always something extra. It's not just an individual. A Jew is always seen as something plus, forced
Wow.
to speak out for a collective, identified with an imagined realm of modernity or whatever.
Mm,
So there is this framework, Jewish agency and subjectivity happens in, and through these clubs like Austria Vienna, we can understand that this is also something that is negotiated, changing, contested, and we can see it playing out in these Jew clubs. Maybe just to mention Tottenham again, because we've spoke so much about Tottenham. It is still the case that the club is against it, so they don't want the fans to use the word. They ban
mhm.
it. They say you're not allowed to say it in the stadium. We don't want this. End of story. And the fans still do it.
Yeah.
And if you go into the stadium, you just feel like, okay, the whole debate is outside of the stadium and inside the stadium. It's just a way of celebrating a
Debate's
corner
over.
kick or
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
goal. Or I was
Wow.
actually during one game, I was sitting next to a father with the son, and the father was kind of leaning over the son in this caring way and was chanting Yid Army, and kind of inviting the son to join. And I felt like, okay, this is going on for generations. This is this is not going to
Not
stop
going away
if
anytime soon.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's very fascinating. I appreciate your time and just, if nothing else, I know that it's so difficult to get really deep into some of these concepts and conversations, but uh you do a wonderful job of introducing things that could be just very complex. And especially for someone who, didn't grow up in a certain culture or with that understanding. But like I said, in some ways I found connection to it through how I did grow up in some of the cultures that I did grow up in and seeing what role, if anything else, does a minority voice play in these larger contexts and in this arena where it's one of the beauties of sports in that it can bring so many different types of people together. And when we all come together, we all, I guess, have our baggage, and sometimes, in some cases, we get a chance to unpack it together and really kind of talk through it together. But man, Pavel, I want to thank you for your time. Is there anything else that you want to make sure gets mentioned or plugged before we wrap up? I know you'll be here in a few days, so hopefully folks can come out and start to formulate different questions or things that they would like to kind of contribute or add to this conversation. Post this podcast. But I'll pass the mic over to you. Anything else that you'd like to touch on or say?
Oh, I just really want to say that I enjoyed this conversation, and you also did a wonderful job. And I really enjoyed how you made all these connections to Vanderbilt, to other teams in the US. And I mean, when I moved to Michigan for my PhD, before I got there, I had season tickets for football and basketball, and I was also
Mhm.
thinking hockey. But I said, okay, no, I have to do this graduate work, and I only can do two.
Sure.
But to kind of come to a new place and engage with a sport culture that matters to the people there and become part of it and get to understand local identities and what's going on there. And I think, uh, yeah, to me, this podcast was again proof like how powerful sport is across spaces and across even sport cultures and sport codes, like between football and soccer, basketball and soccer, or even
Mhm.
baseball. Then I mean this is yeah, where does society happen? Where do so many people go? I mean Ann Arbor really kind of blew my mind in this being a city of I don't know I think a little less than 100,000, and you have this stadium that is packed with 110,000 every game.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And yeah, sport is just this wonderful, joyful thing of beauty,
Hmm.
of moving bodies, of athleticism, of getting together, but also for discussing these difficult issues because they also play out in the stadium, of course. No player would kind of leave a personal or political opinion out of the locker room, or a fan does not leave it at the stadium gate and get it back after. They bring it with them.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth to engage in these conversations across sports and countries and continents, because I do believe that we have a lot to win and to gain, not only as a kind of the outcome of a game, but also in engaging with these questions altogether. Yeah, the questions like what kind of society do we want to live in? How do we want to engage with each other? And in sport culture, these things play out in a very condensed way, and this makes it so beautiful.
Oh man. I think you put a bow on it right there, man. That's good. That's really good. That's great. I guess I have to do my acknowledgments right now. My dad is a big Ohio State fan. I didn't know. I didn't know he went to Michigan before we started this, so I'm sorry, Dad. But I felt like it was too late. I couldn't walk out. I'm talking directly to my father right now. The podcast, it was too late. We were already on the podcast. I couldn't leave, you know. So I have to acknowledge that. And I have to acknowledge my father-in-law, who is he's the biggest Tottenham Hotspur fan that I know, which means that he's the saddest person that I know. But he's a great guy. I guess for you, I don't know, do you follow the Premier League like week to week? Is that something? Do you have an English club that you root for or anything like that?
I do not. Interestingly, I don't know how about you, but for me, it feels like, okay, I have the team Werder Bremen, so soccer
Hmm.
is already kind of, the heart is full. But
Yeah,
as I
yeah.
came to Michigan, I realized, okay, I have still space for other sport codes. I still have, so I follow the Michigan football team and the basketball team from Germany.
There you go.
I started with NFL, but this
Didn't connect.
didn't connect for like for a longer time. But I also had an interesting experience because my first NFL game was in the MetLife Stadium, and it was a preseason game between the New York Giants and the Jets. And I said, okay, the Werder Bremen team is green and white, and our rivals are
Uh,
blue and white. So I know which team I'm going to support. And as the game continued, I felt like, oh, what's happening? I like the Giants. I don't like this other. Like, okay, so even if you go to a game and you choose the team before, the team
yeah,
still chooses. I mean, yeah.
that's awesome.
This is a question I'm still wondering. How is it possible that the team chose me and I didn't choose the team? I mean,
Well, I
I
think you
came into
should
the space. I was so certain
you were
which
definitely
team
going to
I'm
be a
going to
Jets
support.
fan. I
Yeah, yeah.
think
Didn't happen. Yeah.
if left to your own devices, no one should choose the Jets. I think that I think any Jets fan will tell you that, like, don't do this, don't embark on this journey.
Mm.
But yeah, no, that's hilarious. As a Falcons fan myself, I can say I can sympathize. Don't choose them. Like, pick any other team. But that's hilarious. I love how you said that. Like, you know, from a college standpoint, Vanderbilt is all consuming. My heart is full. But for pretty much any other sport, I have an appetite for it. And so, yeah,
Mm.
Andrew makes fun of me because I've become a big Aston Villa supporter.
Mm.
Um, and you know, it, a lot of people say that I'm basically the only Aston Villa fan in Nashville, which is not true. Aston Villa actually came to Nashville over the summer, and there are, in fact, dozens of us. So there are at least 50 Aston Villa fans in Nashville. But that's fantastic, man. I wish you kind of safe travel as you promote this book and engage in these conversations, across the world and over here in the United States. I am a little bit skeptical of the timing that it just so happened to be that you're going to be in Ann Arbor when Michigan and Michigan State play. I'm a little bit I'm a little bit I don't know. I don't know if that was did that just happen that way or was that maybe circled and then we retrofitted that one then.
No, it actually happened. If I would have gone through the sport games calendar first, I would see a game, would it be basketball or another sports code in every city I'm visiting. And
Fair.
unfortunately, it's only in Ann Arbor. It's only possible to see something that kind of fits the calendar.
Hey, man.
Yeah, but next time I'm going to see more.
There you go. Well, if you make it back through Nashville, especially if we've got a game, let me know and we'll definitely I know Andrew will probably co-sign on this as well. We'd love to host you and bring you out and football game, basketball game, whatever it is you name the sport. We'd love to have you and love to see in some of these at a game here as well. But man, great conversation, Pavel. Thank you so much for everything. I'll go ahead and wrap it. But just to remind everybody, you'll be here on campus on March 6th, and you'll be speaking to a class about your book and engaging in conversation around the making of a Jew club and kind of where we are today, also exploring the history. But man, I really appreciate you and I appreciate your time. Have a wonderful day.